Hi. Okay, in this last part, we're going to discuss category or organizing our data in a frequency table using class intervals. And so you may think, well, why do we need class intervals? Well, unlike we would love, right, simple data, small sets of data, it just isn't like that. Like in the real world, like when AT&T needs to do research for lowest drop calls, they have to do millions of pieces of data. If we wanted to research any subject of our students at our college, we have over what, 10,000 students. That's over 10,000 pieces of data. So how are we going to organize that? We can't just list them like we did in the previous example, 0 through 10,000, right? We need actual ways to organize data because we like working smarter and not harder, of course, and like things more organized if possible. So let's go ahead and take a look. So the first thing we need to do is kind of have some sort of guidelines of how to do class intervals. Usually your technology will do it, but since this is a math class, we like to show the mathematical background behind statistics and how these techniques have been obtained. So we're just going to look and then usually use technology hereafter. Okay, so the first thing we need to know is how many classes can we have if we're going to categorize them. Can I have 10,000 classes? No, you probably should have about, the rule of thumb is 5 to 20. And then usually in this is an introduction class, so usually we will tell you how many classes, but when you get to your higher level statistics and doing research methods course, you're going to have to decide that for yourself and for the basis of your research. The other most important part is every class is of equal size. So if you decide to make the class 10, a width of 10, then every class in the entire table has to also be the width of 10. Um, then also your table should contain all the data in the set. So you can't just guess for your data of what it should look like. There is a mathematical technique in which we're going to use to find this perfect class range so that the class range contains all pieces of data. Okay, and then this is kind of really important. So when we do these class intervals, they're going to look like this, like with 130 to 139, 120 to 129. And then we see that we want to actually use the midpoints of the classes to graph. So usually we don't use the midpoints usually to do anything, but to graph usually. And so we use the class midpoints to graph quantitative data, and that's just taking the average of the upper and lower class limits. But we can always use those midpoints for graphing, and then when we get to chapter 2 with frequency tables with class intervals, we will also have to use the midpoints because we really can't calculate an average of an interval unless for a whole data set unless we take those midpoints. So we'll be doing all of that. So I have a really good data set right here. Okay, so the total cost of textbooks for the term was collected from 36 students, and we want to create a frequency table with 9 class intervals. And so here we can see we have textbook costs all the way from 140 all the way to 460. And so here in the cost column, we're going to have these intervals, right? Whatever, starting at the lowest to whatever the class width. Here is the column for the midpoints in which we'll take the average and then the frequency, so the counts. So I think the first thing we need to do is go ahead before we do anything is determine our class range. And then for our class range, we'll be able to do the subtraction and get the first column going. So the first thing we would want to do is find the class range, or in other words, the class width. So we would just go ahead and take the largest textbook value, which is 460, and subtract the smallest, which is 140. and divided by the number of class intervals. And so we wanted 9 class intervals, so we'll go ahead and divide that by 9. So if we do that, we do get a decimal of something like 35.55 and then repeating. And so in the box, we see if we divide the range by the number of class intervals, this will give us the class range for each interval, and therefore we will round up if necessary. So if we have a decimal like this, which is 35.555, we would have to round up to 36. So this would be the class width. So the second part would be that if our classes starts at 140, we would put the 140 here in the first row of cost, and then know that the next second row would start at, so let me put like row 2, would be 140 plus 36, which would be 176. And then 36 thereafter. Okay, so because the data is all given to us in whole dollars, that means I can just go ahead and keep everything in whole dollars. I'm not rounding anything yet in the calculator for my class ranges, so everything will just be in dollars. So the upper limit in the first row, if the lower limit in the second row is 176, if I keep everything in whole dollars, then that spot here will be 175. So it's important that we get all these lower limits down first, and then we can go ahead and do all those upper limits just $1 less than that next lower limit. So let's go ahead and do that. You'll take 176 and add 36 and get 212. And then add 36 for the next lower limit, which is 248. And then add 36 to get 284, and then so on. So I'll let you do the rest. So here in this last table, we're going to put 463. That would be $1 less than the next class width. And then just keep going. So here it was 428 here, which means it'll be 427 there. And it's 392 here, so it'll be 391 there. And I'll let you go ahead and do the rest. Okay, so now the next column states that we need to find midpoints. So midpoints were described to us in the note that said that they are the average of the lower and upper class limit. So when we do the midpoints, let's just take the first row, which would be 140 and 175, and we would add those together. So the first midpoint, so let's find midpoint. So the first one would be 140 plus 175 divided by 2. And so when you do 140 plus 175 and then divide by 2, you get 157.5. So the second row would be 176 plus 211 all over 2. So when you put 176 in the calculator plus 211 divided by 2, you get 193.5. And what I'm going to show you is a little pattern here that we'll see with our midpoint. So let me do a third one, and maybe you'll see it better. So the third row is 212 plus 247 divided by 2. So if I do 212 plus 247 and divide by 2 in the calculator, I'll get 229.5. So if I put these here, so 157.5, 193.5, 229.5, look at the difference between these. If you look at the difference and subtract 193.5 and 157.5, you get 36. And if you take 193, the difference between 193 and 229.5, you also get 36. Notice that the difference between each midpoint is also the same as the class width. And don't forget, the class width is this difference between two successive lower limits. And so the midpoints follow that same pattern. So if you wanted to, you could go ahead and just take 229.5 and add 36 to get 265.5 and so on. So you really don't need to do this entire quotient 9 times. What you could do is do just a few and then see that it's the class width and just start adding really fast on the calculator. So I'm going to go ahead and just keep the pattern and take 265.5 and add 36 to get 301.5 and so on. So I'll go ahead and take a moment and do that. All right, so the last part of this is this frequency chart. So now all we have to do is count. Let's count how many in each category. So let's go through and just look at the number of dollars that lie between 140 and 175. Because these are already in order, notice it goes the lowest and then it goes higher. We'll see that we have 140 to 165, and 180 will belong in the next row. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4 in the first class. So how many between 176 and 211? So 212 to 247, 1, 2, 3. 248 to 283, 1, 2, 3. 284 to 319, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. So that seems like the highest amount class, right? The students are spending more in that class of 284 and 319. Okay, so let's keep going and I'll let you do the rest for counting. 320 to 355. Okay, and then once again, if you wanted to make sure, you could add up all these frequencies here and make sure that the total is 36 for 36 students. So 4 plus 1 is 5, plus 6 is 11, 22, 29, 32, 34, and 36. So it looks like we captured all the textbook costs. And this looks nice. We constructed, once again, a frequency table with class intervals, 9 class intervals of width 36, and with midpoints and the counts or the frequencies for each of the categories. Okay.